As its season begins, the National Football League continues to face off against thousands of former players in a historic legal battle over long-term health issues, money, and race. 60 Minutes Plus correspondent Wesley Lowery brings us a preview of a new 60 Minutes Plus report on the issue of race norming.
In 2018, Love underwent 8 hours of neurological tests, gauging, among other things, his memory, language, and processing abilities, all conducted by NFL-approved doctors.
They said early stages of dementia.
Do you remember what you felt like when you heard that word, dementia?
I think I was more so like, nah, are you kidding me? Like, dementia, you know?
You didn't think that could even be true necessarily?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because I'm young. You know? And that happens to old people. Not young people. You know, I'm 46 now. I mean, I don't know how will I be at 56, you know?
You worry about that?
Oh yeah, it's a degenerative thing, so you don't know where you're gonna end up and how you're gonna be.
I miss you guys.
I miss you too.
Love submitted his dementia diagnosis to the outside firm handling claims, hoping to collect the $1.5 million for which he was eligible. The firm approved the claim, but when it went to the NFL for review, the league refused to pay him.
They awarded me the award, but then they, what do you call it? They awarded me, and then
They appealed it.
They appealed it, yes.
And how did you feel when you found that out?
Betrayed. Why? What do you mean? I mean, it's like you put something in your hand and then they snatch it back.
All right, so Wesley joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. I think this is something that most people had not heard of before, race norming. So let's just start with a basic explanation. What is it, and how does it play into the discrimination the NFL is being accused of with concussion settlements?
Of course. And so for some background, right, race norming is a concept that has been around in medicine for decades, going back years. And the idea was to correct for biases that exist in things like IQ tests, right? So we understand that things like socioeconomic background, educational attainment can factor into your ability to perform on an IQ test, even though it doesn't actually impact your cognitive ability. And so, and we know that some people we know that Black Americans, for example, are more likely to have less educational attainment or those type of socioeconomic factors. And so race norming, the idea was to correct for that, to correct for the biases. However, what we're seeing in the NFL concussion settlement is that the doctors have been instructed in some cases, or it's been raised that they might apply race norms to how they're concluding who receives a settlement and who does not. And so what that means is that two players can go in. They can be assessed for dementia, for ALS, for Parkinson's, and a white player who has a score, a certain score, will get a payout, while a Black player, the score is graded on a curve, where it's assumed that Black players have a lower cognitive ability to begin with. And so therefore, a Black player has to score even worse on the test, has to show more cognitive decline in order to get the same payout as a white player.
So Wesley, Clarence Love's attorney claims that if he was not assessed and graded on a curve based on his race, he would have been eligible for a payout. He spent 6 seasons as a cornerback for 3 different NFL teams. After speaking with him about his experience, did he express any form of regret?
You know, it was interesting. He was torn. He still really appreciates all the things he got out of football. He loved the game. He got to make money. He made friends. He won a Super Bowl. But when he looks at what happens now, I mean, you saw in the clip how he struggles to get his words out, how he's struggling to form sentences. This is a young man. He's 47 years old. This isn't someone in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And he knows that this cognitive decline is going to continue. And so there are times in those moments where he can't remember what day it is, where he's calling his mom on the wrong day, wishing her happy birthday, where he does wonder how his life might have been different if he hadn't ever played football.
So earlier this year, the NFL agreed to halt the use of tests that rely on race norming to resolve claims within the concussion settlement, and it says that it will reassess claims by black former players. What more has the league said about the impact of race norming on its black players?
Of course. Well, in the NFL, well, they provided us, lengthy statements. They have been relatively tight-lipped on this, in part because there are two former players, both of whom are black, who are suing over this practice at the time, right? And so the NFL has some legal liability if they say too much about this practice. But they've said consistently kind of two things that you might think are a little contradictory. The first is that they do not believe they denied players based on race norms. They basically try to reject the premise. But secondarily, that any player who didn't get paid out because of race norms, they will reevaluate, right? So on the one hand, they're trying to dispute that they were really doing this, but then on the other hand, are saying, well, but in the cases where we did it, we will try to rectify it. But as you said, it's the time that's been missed out, treatment that hasn't been done, in some cases 4 years, but beyond that even, right? It's the drama and the trauma of here you are, finding out that the game you played for your life might have caused you cognitive impairment, that you're now in your 40s and your 50s with dementia, with ALS, with Parkinson's, and then have the league say, no, you don't. That's not what happened. and I do think that in addition to just actual payouts, there is some trauma in having to fight this fight on behalf of your own medical conditions. The doctors give you a traumatic diagnosis, and then the people who hold the purse strings to help you pay for the treatment go, no, we don't believe you. In some ways, you're getting it from both sides.
Wesley, do we know if the league currently has any protocols or preventative measures to protect current players from what Love and other players are struggling with?
So the league has taken a lot of steps in the wake of the development of science around CTE and additional concussion studies to try to reduce the number of players who are being concussed during NFL games. Now, what's hard for the league and for anyone involved in football is that this science, this medical science, is still relatively new. And because it's brain science and the way it works, most of the best research happens after former players are dead. And we can study their brains and poke around and do things. And so because of that, it's unclear the extent to which the steps that the league are taking today will resolve some of these problems, because we still have to wait years in many cases to really be able to study these players and see what happens. I mean, there is an argument to be made, and some people have made it, that a sport where people slam their heads into each other is probably not a good thing when it comes to cognitive health, and that there might be an inherent risk in playing football. And the league obviously has an interest in that not being true, and in finding ways to play the sport and continue the sport, and while also protecting the health of its players. But what we know today in terms of the risk involved in the NFL and in any football is much more than we knew even 5 or 10 years ago. And so we have to imagine we'll know much more 5 to 10 years from now.
This is such a fascinating story and a fascinating topic, Wes. I wonder, before we let you go, it's always intriguing to me how journalists come up or pursue stories, or the moment that you find something interesting and you start to pull that thread and you start to uncover more than what people may have perceived. How did it happen in this case?
So the idea of race norming, again, because of the lawsuit and some other things, has been out there. It's been written about. ABC did a good report on it a year or so ago. The Washington Post just did a big piece. But the team I was working with at 60 Minutes Plus, we thought that there was still more room to be mined there, both because the concept is wonky and complicated, but also because, in our opinion, a lot of that coverage didn't focus enough on the stories of these players. I wanted to see them. I wanted to hear them. In addition to getting into all the wonky stuff. I love the wonky stuff, right? And so my colleagues, Emily Cameron and Aisha Siddiqui, just did a remarkable job in reporting this out, in finding players, and getting and drilling into the science of this. And I think that really helped us tell a story that was not just about this wonky race science stuff or the NFL concussion settlement. That was about Clarence Love and the other players we talked to, and how this many years after they make the decision in middle school or high school to play football, they're still dealing with the consequences of that decision, consequences that at the time they had no way of knowing.
Fascinating. Wes Lowery, as always, my friend, excellent reporting. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. You can stream Wesley's full 60 Minutes Plus report right now on Paramount Plus.